Welcome to our weekly Forex forecast, and this is for trading for the week of March 2nd to the 6th, 2020. Just a quick disclaimer here before we get started. This is for educational purposes only. Trading is a risky business, so please be careful with your money. All right, as usual, we'll start off by taking a look at our calendar here. Okay, so before we actually go into the news, let's take a look at overall what's going on in the markets. So we have seen this kind of back and forth between the risk on, risk off environment. And we were seeing that equity markets were going up, and then last week, everything tanked completely. And we have seen the stock markets basically around the world sort of drop, and main reason for that was the concerns around coronavirus. So before we saw that, the market was basically ignoring the whole issue. There was a little bit where they got concerned about it, then they ignored it, and now it's coming to forefront again, or it has come to forefront again, because one, there's no cure for it just yet, and now we are seeing cases outside of China and outside of Asia as well, and the number of deaths have gone up, number of cases have gone up, and some of these cases are not even related to the travel. So as a result of that, markets are spooked. Because that means that it won't just be China that will be impacted, or the Chinese economy that will be negatively impacted by this issue. Now it's kind of around the world. So that's what we have seen. On Friday, though, we did hear from Fed saying that they will do whatever is required in order to support the market. So that pushed things back up. So now we need to keep an eye on how things develop. Now, we have seen quite a bit of a drop in the stock market, which means it could get reversed. And that means all of our safe haven currencies, Japanese yen, Swiss franc, all of those would reverse as well. So this is something that we need to monitor. It's a developing thing. We can't really predict ahead of time what will happen with it, but it's something that we'll just need to monitor day by day. All right, so having said that, let's go into our news here, see what's coming up. We do have the manufacturing PMI numbers here for China, and already the numbers supposed to drop. Are supposed to be lower than the previous one. So if it's even lower than this one, that will be negative here for New Zealand dollar and Australian dollar, because both of those economies are closely tied into Chinese economy because they're exporters to China. So keep an eye on this number here. So bias here would be just basically as soon as we get the number, if it's below expectations, look for the negative bias in New Zealand dollar and Australian dollar. And then we have PMI numbers out of the Eurozone. So we have seen that first British pound was very bullish, and then that completely flipped. And now we have seen Euro was very bullish last week. But if these manufacturing PMI numbers come in below expectations here, we could see Euro flip, because overall structurally Euro shouldn't be that strong. But we have seen this back and forth between Euro and British pound. When Euro was going down, British pound was going up. And now when British pound was dropping last week, we saw Euro go back up. So if Euro reverses direction, that means our British pound can also reverse direction. So just keep that in mind. So these PMI numbers out of the Eurozone will be very important for that. We also have manufacturing PMI numbers for US. Anytime we see PMI numbers, these are leading indicators from fundamental perspective. So these numbers are important, especially right now, because there is so much concern around coronavirus and how that will impact different economies. So keep an eye on this. Again, if these numbers are below expectations, we are going to see US dollar drop as a result of that. Also, though, if we start hearing more comments from Fed in regards to cutting rates, or basically putting more money into the market, that will also be negative for the US dollar. It will be good for the stock markets, but it will be negative for the US dollar. So keep an eye on that as well. And then we do have the cash rate here and the Reserve Bank of Australia rate statement. At this point, not really expecting an interest rate cut, but again, we'll have to be very careful and pay attention to the commentary or the statement that comes out, because if Reserve Bank of Australia expresses concerns in regards to the coronavirus and its impact on Chinese economy and in turn for Australian economy, and they basically downgrade their forecast for growth for 2020 or 2021, that will be negative, and we could see Australian dollar drop as a result of that. However, on the other hand, though, if we see that they are not as concerned about it, that will be positive for Australian dollars. So that's very important at this point. And then we have GDP numbers here out of Australia. Again, important numbers to pay attention to here. Right now, we're expecting it to basically be in line with the previous numbers. But again, if we see a drop here, because these are quarterly numbers, so if you see a drop here, then that would be negative for Australian dollar here. And of course, we have services PMI numbers here for China as well. Same thing, it will have an impact on Australian dollar and New Zealand dollar. Now, we have another central bank here, Bank of Canada. Prior to that, we also have services PMI numbers here and from UK as well. So we could get volatility this week. So just keep that in mind, because as the numbers come out, it will expose the problems that the different economies are facing. And as a result, we could see things go back and forth. And because we're seeing PMI numbers for all the different countries here, that will basically make it volatile. Bank of Canada. So Bank of Canada, it's interesting because they did raise rates and they have not cut rates. So there has been a lot of speculation in regards to Bank of Canada. And now that we are seeing oil, or we have seen oil drop, take such a big hit, now focus will be on Bank of Canada to see if they're going to cut rates in order to support the economy. So if they're right now, they're not expected to cut rates, but if they even hint at cutting rates in the future, that will be negative for Canadian dollar. So Canadian dollar has already taken a hit this previous week, but any talk of interest rate cuts can push it down further. On the flip side, though, same thing, if a Bank of Canada comes out and basically expresses that they're not that concerned about it, that it's just a small blip, it will kind of work itself out, all of that will be positive for Canadian dollar. So again, we just have to pay attention and see what the central banks are thinking at this point. We also have trade balance numbers here for Australia. And as we can see, they're supposed to drop from the previous numbers, but this number is impacted heavily by what happens in China, because Australia exports a lot of stuff to China. So if the number, again, is below expectations, then that means Australian economy is being more negatively impacted than what was expected by the market. And again, it's good push Australian dollar lower. OPEC meetings here with the oil prices dropping like they have been. The focus will be on OPEC meetings once they start on Thursday here, and the eyes will be to see if they're going to cut production or if they're going to do anything to manage the prices for oil. And if they come out with any kind of comments in regards to a plan to basically support the oil prices, that will be positive. However, on the other hand, if they don't say anything about coming up with a plan to manage them, then we could either see not much of an impact, or it could even have a negative impact. But more importantly, market will be expecting them to take some action to support the oil prices. And then we have more central bankers here. We have Bank of England, Governor Carney, and then Bank of Canada, Governor Pola speaking. Here, after the statement or cash statement here, interest rate statement from Bank of Canada, focus will be on Governor Poloz because what we generally see is there's a reaction to the rate statement. And then when we actually see the central banker speaking, that tends to have another reaction because then our journalists get to ask questions, and based on how those questions are answered, market prices get impacted. So again, we'll have to keep an eye here. Now with the British pound being negatively impacted, so the reason it dropped last week was because both European Union and UK are sort of digging their heels in regards to the trade talks between the two. And if they don't, so before we saw that they were being more positive, last week they were not so positive, they were more digging their heels in. So if we continue to see this type of scenario, then there will be more pressure on Bank of England to cut rates. So far Bank of England has not talked about cutting rates or the need to cut rates, but should that change, then that will have an impact on a British pound. But if nothing really changes from what they have said before, then I would not expect anything to happen in that regard. A lot of data here for Australia. Again, if the data is below expectations, then we are going to see an impact on Australia. All right, big Friday here. So we have employment numbers both from Canada and the US. So for non-farm payroll, this is a major number that comes out every month, first week of every month. And so we're going to see that this week. With regards to the non-farm payroll, we need to look at employment numbers as well as average earning numbers. So if either of these numbers drop, that will have a negative impact on US dollar. So that's what we have. And actually, if these numbers drop, then again, not only will the US dollar drop because of the negative numbers, but it will also drop because then the market will be expecting Fed to cut rates. So that's what we have going on this week. Expect volatility as we have a ton of data coming up. And then on top of that, we of course have the coronavirus issues. All right, so let's move on to our charts here. We did see quite a drop in a lot of our yen crosses. So let's see where we are at. Not so much for euro. Euro went up like we talked about. Okay, so here now we have a bullish candle close here. So bias is to the upside. But do keep in mind, once we have such a big move, things can change and things can reverse. So that would be the caution. So bias here is to the upside, but again, with caution, because this one can change. So the move I would expect is either price goes into 1.1100 and then turns around, because we are into an important support resistance area at this point. As we can see, price has reacted at this point multiple times. So this was the point where it pushed higher from that, and here it did the same, and now this one could drop from here. So that would be the first thing to keep in mind. So bias is bullish, but like I said, it could turn around. So this is actually kind of what I'm expecting, and then it can turn around here, or it could go higher and turn around at this level here, because this is also an important support resistance level at 1.1240, around that level. So bias here is bullish, but again, with caution, considering all the things that we have discussed here. Okay, so that's euro. So let's take a look at pound. Like I said, pound dropped last week and it completely flipped. So actually, no, we were looking for that, but from previous. So bias here is still to the downside, But as we can see, we are into this support resistance level, which has been an important or has played an important role previously. So in this case, bias is still to the downside. I would be a little cautious here because one, we have a lot of data coming out this week, and another is that with the with the coronavirus issue, there is pressure on central banks to now react and talk about cutting rates. So if that happens, that will of course change things, but this is the move I would expect. So bias is to the downside. First target is 1.2710, second one is 1.2580. So bearish bias here for pound dollar. Australian dollar, this one took quite a hit last week. And now we are into levels that we haven't seen in quite some time, all the way back from 2008. So we just need to be cautious here, because once we start getting into these levels, the chances of it reversing are higher. So at this point, bias is bearish because the trend is still to the downside here. Now, in terms of our pullback, we could get a pullback a little. So for pullback, I would look at 0.6550 potentially, and then looking for a further drop here. But like I said, if there is a lot of commentary from central banks wanting to support the markets and wanting to cut rates, or have the willingness to cut, showing willingness to cut rates, this would change and things can flip around, like we saw on Friday when Fed announced that they're willing to support the market. So right now, I would look for a potential pullback into 0.6550 and then a further drop, or it could go even higher into 0.6580 and then drop. So first target is 0.6450 and then 0.6350. So bias is bearish for Aussie dollar. New Zealand dollar, this one took a big hit as well last week. As we see, price has gone through or right into our support level here. So bias still remains to the downside. Overall trend is still to the downside, but now it's into important support. So at this point, if the price does not hold below our 0.6200 level, see, this is such an important support level, but if it goes through it, then we'll look for a continuation. But if it doesn't go through, then we could see a reversal like we saw here or we saw here. So this is an important support level. I wouldn't blindly go into a long here because bias still is to the downside, but I would pay close attention, because if it doesn't break below the support, chances are very high that it would reverse, because as we can see, price, every time price has come to this level so far, it has reversed since 2009. Now, should it break through this level, then we have a lot of room to the downside for that continuation lower. So bias still remains to the downside, but with caution, and because if Fed cuts rates, or they talk about cutting rates, US dollar is going to drop. And with the US dollar dropping, all the dollar crosses are going to go up. So that's the thing we have to keep in mind. For now though, based on just purely the technicals here, bias is to the downside, and the rest we'll have to just keep in mind. So looking for a pullback potentially into 0.6280 or even 0.6300. And then next target is 0.6200 and then 0.6080. So bias is bearish for New Zealand dollar. Dollar CAD here, this one went up quite a bit, and then we saw price change directions or drop here because of the Fed announcement of wanting to support the market. So at this point, bias is still to the upside because the overall bias is bullish still. Now we have to be cautious. Like I said, if Fed keeps on talking about cutting rates, chances are very high this is going to drop because US dollar will drop. So first thing I would look for is a retest of 1.3450. If it holds below, then I'm looking for a further drop here. On the other hand, though, actually the bias here is to the upside. So if price drops into 1.3350 and then continues on, I'm looking for a further move to the upside. So as long as it holds above this level, it is still bullish, which is 1.3350. So as long as it's above that, it's bullish. So at this point, bias is bullish. 1.3450 is the first target. Second target is 1.3520. So dollar CAD is bullish for now. Euro pound, big move up in euro pound based on bullishness in euro and bearishness in our British pound here. Now, as we can see, price is into resistance, and this is an important support resistance level. And this is quite a move to the upside. A lot of times these moves can get reversed, so do watch out. But overall bias for now is bullish. It has gone through all this mess. We have a double bottom type of structure in place here. So bullish bias for now. And we have to be mindful of the resistance. If it doesn't go through, same thing. If it goes into the resistance and turns around, then it may just stay below and reverse directions from here, which can happen because if the PMI numbers come in bear or negative or below expectation, I should say, they're not negative. If they come in below expectations for euro, I would look for a drop. But for now, based on technicals alone here, bias is bullish. Next target is 0.8720. So bullish bias here. And the move that I would watch out for this one would be a potential pullback into 0.8550 and then a further move to the upside. So bullish bias for euro pound. Euro Swiss franc here. This one has been interesting, and it so with the safe haven currencies, Japanese yen, all the yen crosses dropped because of the flows into Japanese yen as the stock markets have tumbled. Swiss franc hasn't done the same, and usually we see that Japanese yen and Swiss franc tend to move this in the same direction when the stock markets are crashing. And this means that their Swiss National Bank is intervening in the markets. They had talked about intervening in the markets previously, and they're known to do that all the time because they do not want Swiss franc to actually become too strong, because it will have a negative impact on their exports. So this is what we are seeing right now. It feels like they are, so they don't come out and show everybody when they're intervening, but it looks like, just based on price behavior, looks like they're intervening in the market, which means this one could go even higher because they'll keep supporting it. The key level to watch here would be 1.0660. So if it goes through this level, I would look for next move higher. But if it gets stuck here, this one again could change directions as well. But if stock markets go back up, in that case, I would look for an up move here as well. And then all the dollar crosses, all the Swiss franc crosses, Swiss franc crosses, as well as Japanese yen crosses, will go up in that case. So for now, bias here is bullish, and watch out for 1.0660. If it holds below, then it's likely to continue back into this trend, because trend is still to the downside, and this is just a short-term pullback that I'm looking for here. So for now, bullish bias here. Swiss pound, Swiss franc though, British pound was very, very bearish, and this one has dropped quite a bit. Now bias is to the downside, and pullback 1.2480 would be the pullback level to watch. And as long as it, so what I'm looking for is this type of a move, right? Now, if price comes into 1.2320 and doesn't break through, we could get a reversal here. So just watch out for that, because we have had some pretty large moves in all pound crosses. So these can reverse the coming week. So that's something to be cautious about. But bias is bearish for pound Swiss franc. Dollar Swiss franc, same thing, a big drop here. and now we are into support. This is an important support level here. Last time price had bounced around, so we'll have to see, does it do the same here? Bias is to the downside. Next target here would be, so the move I'm looking for is a potential pullback into 0.9690, so approximately 0.9700, and then a drop. But same thing here, if it holds above 0.9600, then this one can also turn. So this can be strong support and it can flip around, but once it goes through, the next level is 0.9540, and then it could go even further. But for now, bias is bearish for dollar Swiss franc. Yen crosses a big drop here in pound yen. And when we see big drops like this, they can get reversed. Like I said, especially with the pound, it just flipped directions. It was going up the week before, and then it has completely reversed direction. So do watch out, because this one can again do the same thing. For now though, bias is bearish. And in terms of our targets, so first, do keep an eye out for a pullback. So we could get a pullback into 139.25 and then a further drop, or we could get more of a deeper pullback into a 140, 140, and then a drop here. So watch out for that deeper pullback, but bias is to the downside. But as we can see here, this one is also into the support resistance level. So if it doesn't break below the previous week's low here, then this one can reverse as well. For now though, just based on technicals and all, like I said, bias is to the downside for pound yen as well. Euro yen, we saw a drop on Friday here. It's still kind of trading in this range that it's been in for several weeks now. Bias is to the downside, but like we saw last time, the bias was to the downside. It just came into the support right here. It comes from all the way there, and then it bounced up, came back down. So we are seeing that the price is stuck in this range here. So now we need to see, can it break below the range? So once it holds below 118.30, then we can look for that continuation move to the downside. So bias for now is bearish. Just be aware of this, because if it doesn't go through 118.30, then it's very likely to go back into the range. But this is the bias here, looking for it to drop further. First target is 117 here. And then we're looking at 115.80. But I would take all of this with a grain of salt, because when we have such big moves, they just do tend to reverse. So just keep that in mind, because we could see some big reversals this week. And I wouldn't be surprised about that. Okay, so with this one here, I am looking for a drop here again. So this is what I would expect, a potential pullback into 108.80 and then a drop. First target 107.50, and then we're looking at 106.50. So bias is bearish again for dollar yen. Aussie yen, this one just kept on dropping, and we have a bearish candle close here. As we can see, bias still overall remains to the downside, but this is where price had turned around before, and we have seen price react at this level several times. So I would be cautious, but should it break through the next level here, next target is to the downside. And let's zoom back in. Okay, with this one, potential pullback either into 71.80 or into 71.20, and then looking for a further drop here. So this is what I would look for. 68 would be the next target here. And then below that, we have 66. But like I said, when we have large drops here, they can turn around. So just keep an eye. New Zealand dollar, another one that just fell through the floor here. So bias again is to the downside because of the trend here. And we are coming into these levels that we haven't seen in a while here. Okay, so bias here is bearish, and next target is 65.80 and then 65. But do notice that this is an important support where price turned previously, so we could get a turn here as well. So if it holds above 66.80, this could go higher. So watch out for that, but bias is bearish for now. And then of course we have CAD yen, which just dropped last week. Part of this was just overall with this yen being a safe haven asset, it was bullish, and that's why we saw the yen crosses drop. Another reason for CAD yen specifically was because oil was dropping, and when oil drops, Canadian dollar does not do too well. So there was a double whammy for this one here. So bias here is still bearish. I would look for a potential pullback into 81.50, and then looking for a further drop, 80, and then looking for 79. Now, same thing here, because this is an important support resistance level. If it doesn't go below, if it doesn't hold below, this one can turn around as well. But for now, bias is bearish for CAD yen. All right, so let's take a look at our commodities and see how they held up this week. And this was actually the surprising part, because both silver and gold just dropped. Normally, when we have problems in the stock market, our safe haven assets do quite well, and this is where not everything is lining up right now in the market, so that's why we have to be very cautious. So we saw silver drop and gold drop. Normally they would move in the opposite direction and they should have gone up, but they're not behaving the way they're supposed to. So if there are more comments in regards to the Fed cutting rates, gold and silver will then drop in that scenario. And the safe haven assets or safe haven currencies would drop as well. So we'll see gold, silver drop, and we'll see Japanese yen crosses go up, dollar crosses go up, and Swiss franc crosses go up. So that's the general behavior that we see. But as we can see, stock markets just got killed this week, and so did our gold and silver. So the relationships are not there the way they are supposed to be. That means we just have to be cautious because things can flip around. So with this one, bias is to the downside, but like we saw this move down here, price flipped around. So right now it is holding above the 16.50 level, but if it goes through the low of this week, I would look for it to go even lower into 15.90. So right now bias is bearish, but like I said, with extreme caution with everything we are discussing today, all of this can flip because of the way the market is currently. So the move that we have to keep in mind here is if it holds above here, this is what we could see, especially with an inefficient move like this, things can reverse pretty rapidly. So, so just keep an eye on the stock market. So generally with the stock market going down, the safe haven assets are likely to go back up. Okay, so now with the gold here, we are into an important support resistance level. If price holds above this level, this one I will look to turn as well. But right now it is looking bearish. And this is basically the type of move I would look for. And again, if it doesn't go through this 1550, I would look for a reversal with this one as well. So good point somebody made here is it was month end on Friday, and month end flows can be in the opposite direction of where the market is going. So generally we see big players close positions at month end, so which means they can move in the opposite direction here. So we'll keep an eye on that. But for now, looking for a drop towards 1547. And then if it holds above, I will look for a further move to the upside. And oops. But if the Fed talks about cutting rates, then we could see a further drop in gold and silver. Oil took a beating here as well. Big drop in oil. Now we are into important support. So keep an eye on this one as well. Bias still is to the downside. So as long as we do not see a good sign of reversal here, the bias will stay to the downside. So right now, a potential pullback into 46.80, then looking for a retest of 44.50, and then 42.20 is the next target. So bearish bias here for oil as well. Copper has been stuck here in this range for quite some time, and it is into support, so we do have to be careful. But as soon as we break that support, there's plenty of room to the downside here. It's been struggling with that support for a while here. As we can see, this is an important support level. It hasn't really, it hasn't been pierced for quite some time, since 2016. So if it holds above this level like it has been doing, we could still see it turn and go back into the range just like this. So we had a very strong candle close here, but then it reversed direction, so we could still see that. So with this one, I am neutral, and as soon as we see the drop here through 2.46 though, I will look for next target of 2.37. So neutral bias for that. All right, so Bitcoin has been dropping. I don't have the weekend number, so please confirm those. So based on this though, if price goes below 8,500, I will look for a further drop here. Right now, for the last 2 days, it's kind of held its own above the 8,500 level. So 8,500 level would be that critical level. If it goes through that, then bias is to the downside, but overall bias is to the downside based on our weekly candle close here. Next target is 81.80, and then we're looking at 77.50. So bearish bias here for Bitcoin. All right, so let's take a look at equities here. As we can see, a huge drop here this week. Market just kind of fell off of that, fell off the cliff here. Now, with this one here, on Friday, Fed said that they would support the markets and do whatever is required in regards to the monetary policy, and that pushed the prices up. If we take a look right here, so we saw that price had dropped, or the market had dropped fairly, you know, a fair bit to the downside, but then it reversed directions after we saw that Fed announcement. So this one here, basically we'll have to keep an eye on. Because it's been such a big drop, we could see reversals in the market. So I will keep an eye on reversals for this week. If there is more, so a lot of this news about coronavirus has now been priced into the market, and that's why we could start seeing reversals. But let's say the negativity continues, then we can see a bigger drop. But generally we see that when there are these large drops, market tends to reverse them. So we could see a reversal here as well. That's something we definitely need to keep in mind, because overall there was a lot of positivity in the market, and now we could see a turnaround as soon as Fed actually gives any kind of positive comments in regards to that. We are likely to see it go back up. But for now, this is what I'm looking for. If it doesn't go through that, I will look for a move back up. So biases to the downside for now, and 2850 is the target for S&P 500. Same thing here for Nasdaq. We saw a huge drop here, and on Friday after the drop, based on what Fed said, price went up. But if you take a look at the weekly, we are still in that big negative territory. But if you take a look at this decline here, it went back up, so we could see price go higher back again, or it could go back up higher again. So watch out for that. For now though, bias is to the downside, and we could see a pullback either into 86.50 or 88.80 here, and then get that drop to the downside based on purely the technicals. And if the Fed comes and says they are going to support it, we could see that move to the upside, and that positive sentiment come back into the market. So for now, bearish bias for Nasdaq. Same for Dow Jones. A huge drop here, just fell off the cliff. Big weekly candle close. We haven't seen such a big candle close in a long time. This was the last time it had dropped like this, but then as we can see, it reversed the direction. And because it has been such an inefficient move, price can turn back quickly. So for now, I would say biases to the downside, but again, I'm not super bearish on this, because I would look for price to turn around like it has done in the past. So I would be cautious, still to the downside, biases to the downside, but with caution here. Let's take a look at DAX. Same thing, a huge drop, and on Friday, this one did close bullish as well. So for now, bias is again to the downside, but I would keep an eye on the level that it went to. So this support here is an important level. So if it doesn't go through this support, then I would look for a move back here. But with such an inefficient move, this is also ripe for reversal. So keep that in mind. And then we have FTSE here, same thing. It dropped all the way till we saw the Fed announcements, and then all of the equity markets turned around. So for now, huge drop. Like I said, watch out for reversals. It is to the downside. And if price holds below this 68.50 level, then I would still look for a drop. So we may get a pullback like this and then a move back down. So watch out for that. For now, bias is bearish. But like I said, I am looking for those pullbacks or reversals. Last but not least, we have Nikkei here. Nikkei also went all the way into our support that we haven't seen since 2019, summer of 2019, and then it reversed from there. With this one, I would look for a pullback towards potentially 21,650 or into 21,880, and then we could get this drop. But again, look for those reversals. So that's all I have. We have multiple central bankers talking today, and PMI numbers, and stock market's going crazy. So again, expect volatility, and we just have to be careful trading this week. So that's it for today. You guys have a wonderful trading week, and I'll be back with the daily analysis on Monday here, and that can be found on the YouTube. And if you would like to download the spreadsheet with the targets, you can go to tradingwiththevenus.com/forecast, and you'll be able to download the spreadsheet with the current targets. So that's it for today. Have a wonderful trading week, and I'll see you again. Bye for now.